I don't want AI to write my text so I can have more time for laundry. I want AI to do my laundry so I can write more texts.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of simplyblock's Cloud Commute podcast. Today, I have with me another incredible guest, Paloma. I hope I pronounced that correct, but she can actually say a few words about herself. Hi, Paloma, happy to have you. just splitting my water all over the place. Happy to have you. Maybe just start by introducing yourself.
Yep. Hello. It's a pleasure to have my coffee with Chris and you all. Good morning. I am here. I'm now a person living in the countryside, which I appreciate very much. It's sunny, which is also appreciated. Summer's almost here. I am waking up, coming back from a conference from PyCon data in Berlin. And that's an introduction because that conference wraps up a lot of what I do. I'm currently part of the Python software Verband. I am part of PyLadies Berlin. We're very connected with PyLadies Germany. And on top of that, I talk to a lot of humans. I love talking to humans, and I'm a growth engineer at Saucelabs.
All right, cool. So where are you right now? You're certainly not in Berlin. I see that.
I'm in a small city near Munich called Erlangen here in Germany.
All right. And there's weather like that? God, wrong.
It's real.
I'm in the wrong place. All right, you mentioned Saucelab. Tell us a little bit about Saucelab. What do you guys do?
Yeah, Saucelabs is and it's funny because the name gave us the opportunity to create the best swag. If you ever meet us in a conference, please ask for it because it is delicious. We give away sauces. We are a platform for testing, and it allows you to do all sorts of testing. The whole idea is to allow you to test your whole pipeline and whatever you need, a real device, a specific device, a browser that you cannot find anymore. Basically, we guarantee that your product will be delivered really flawless. And for me, as a growth engineer, that's very impactful and we take for granted a lot. I have this vision of, and I said I like humans because that intersection of engineering and humans for me, it is very important. It is what we're doing this for. Why am I spending so many hours in this issue? Why am I doing that? But then I remember who is going to use it and that will facilitate their lives or that will improve their lives a little better. And it makes a lot of sense. And this is what I'm here for, is to guarantee that whatever you're doing, whoever is using has a really quality and they're happy and they're really meant to do whatever they're supposed to do.
Right. I think you kind of mentioned to that. It's like about the whole pipeline. A lot of people think about when they say, okay, we need testing, we need unit tests, we need integration tests, they often think about all the back-end technologies and like, yeah, I mean, we need to make sure that every query works. We need to make sure that the interaction between the different microservices work. But I think Saucelab is more specifically trying to do the whole end-to-end testing, like including, as you said, browsers and mobile phones and that, right? Why is that important? I mean, I'm a back-end engineer. Why would I care about front-end testing? Mean question, I know.
That way you can do API testing with us as well. You can do, I mean, testing is a fun thing. And one of my main mentors who introduced me to the testing world was Christian Bruman. That is it is the person behind WebDriver.io. And I admire him deeply. And whenever talking about testing, I like his approach a lot. It's like you do something and you make sure it works in the block of the things. And we don't have those things separated. Whatever you ask from your client is coming from a backend. If anything breaks, the endpoint is not going to work. And I think it's easier, like all the front end of the what is directly at the end of the users, right? You're here like that's my end thing. This is how the user. So I think it's a that's the last point of contact. The backend will come, and that will be seen here, but maybe it's easier when you think backwards and like, oh, it's the first very strikeable thing I see. I don't know if it makes sense, but I like to do this backwards perspective all the time. It's like, okay, but what it really matters is, for me particularly, is what the user think. If there's something, and this is quite funny because sometimes we have these engineering meetings and it's like, of course, all the engineers love to create challenging things, right? We don't like to always like create a CSS that fix, but most of the time the CSS will fix because it's like, yeah, maybe we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Maybe if you just leave a notification or a tooltip or a better color to see the button will solve the issue. And for me, this is why it's so important. It's not the complexity of the thing, but how this person that is using would feel happy using it. Will make sense.
I think you mentioned something very important, and that is, as I said, I'm coming from a background engineering perspective, but also as I try to implement an API, or as I try to design an API, I always try to look at it from a user's perspective. Like, you start with the like contract or interfaces, whatever you want to call them, and you design the API in a way that you want it to be used, or as a user, you like it to use, right? And you don't think about it from the implementation perspective yet. And that basically giving you the hard time afterwards, but making it easy for the user. And I think with front end, as you said, it's kind of the same thing. It's the first thing when we use an app or a web application or anything like that. It's the first thing we see. And if that thing completely breaks or falls apart, and especially with mobile phones, I mean, we all love to laugh about browsers and how different they show the same thing. That kind of, well, that thing is mostly solved because it's either Chromium based or it's WebKit based. So that kind of thing solved itself. But we have the same thing with mobile phones, especially in the Android ecosystem, where it's basically all Android, but because everyone's trying to be different now, based on the fact that they have their own like UI overlays or whatever you want to call those things, apps still behave very different. I mean, especially when you're like on the smaller brands, you see a lot of phones or a lot of apps that don't really work the way it should be because they thought like, oh, like dual screen is amazing. And none of the apps understands how dual screen works, except for their own, basically. So yeah, I kind of get it. I think it's important to really have this like cross-platform testing, and I think to do that, you probably have to have a platform, either like Saucelabs or I know there's a few more, especially for mobile phones, because you have to have this like massive range of devices to test on, right?
And it is, I will say that although as a developer, I find it, of course, annoying. I want to just push to do one code that works in everywhere and I have to think about it. But I really, and this is why I also defend, very defensive of open standards. So this, if we use the standards, we could do our own thing, but still meet expectations. That's for me is quite important. Of course, that doesn't happen in the internet. Internet is this crazy place, and all the vendors of browsers, it's all a problematic thing about finding the standard. But as there's another side of me that supports and foments net art or art for the internet, and then is when it becomes really interesting.
Right,
I
right.
like to because then you can make a use of this that one would call a mistake or an error and make use of it in an interesting way. And recently, that for me was, I mean, I haven't been developing for so long, so I haven't developed doing together with the evolution of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But about 2 years ago, I had this, I created this exhibition, and one of the artists, which is a super young artist, PyLadies, she developed this art piece that kind of wanted to look like old school browsers. And we have at the center, I have a center, it's a Center for Net Kunst, so the Center for Net Art, where we fomented the Net Art project. And she developed, we have this really old Mac. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually not that old, but you know those colorful ones?
Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah,
Mac
the iMac,
with
the
that
iMac thing.
color. And she developed for that. And it was so fun, but you had so many issues about how much has changed within the times, even just HTML and CSS. But the funniest is how can you replicate this experience, and everything was so slow and keep crashing, and you could not have more than one tab open at the same time, and it looked really different in her computer than it was in that computer, but it's so different. There was like I just it's not see why is it that my computer is different. She of course was developed with a MacBook Pro, that it's a new generation, it's probably an M1, and then it was a quite fun experience, and then you understand the importance of the testing. That was playful, right? This is no one would depend on it, but
Right.
what if it's a doctor that really needs interface to access an exam, and then you have something that didn't supposed to be there, that I don't know, I'm tripping now, right? I'm not sure if that's an actual real case, but what is something that is really fundamental, like automated cars
Mm-hmm.
or control towers for airplanes. Software is
Or
everywhere.
or airplanes itself.
Oh god. Oh yeah.
We're not talking about Boeing here.
Yeah, but I mean, software, it's not just the fun apps that we do. Software is everywhere. It literally control our lives. There's this lots of cases when Google Maps is started, and if you go to some, I'm originally from Brazil, and there some places like in Rio de Janeiro, you really have to pay attention where you go. You don't want to get to the wrong street, whatever that code really means. It's not like we can find that information on the internet. And sometimes the map would guide you through those places, and there's several, they put people either in a very dangerous situations, or even when the roads stop and people just keep on following blindly there.
Yeah.
We have this connection of trust that would literally guide us. Oh, that was almost a fun. It literally was guiding you through our life.
Yeah, it's true. And I think you mentioned an important fact. Software is everywhere. Even if you think of things like hardware, like embedded systems, there's still firmware in it, and firmware can contain bugs. And if we think about the you've probably seen the picture of, I forgot her name, but the lady that worked on the Apollo project standing next to the source code printed out in like a 1.50 2-meter kind of stack of papers. I find this really incredible how much code they've written and tried to test without actual real world possibilities to test it, and it still worked. And it's like, looking at today's software development, that is far from what it is. Or
That's
not
such
going
an, yeah.
we're not going that far back. When games were delivered on cartridges, the game pretty much had to work. At least to an extent that you don't have to recall all the cartridges, rebuild them, and send them back to the owners. These days, the first thing you do when you buy a game is downloading a patch for it, because it was probably printed way ahead, was not ready, was still like very bug driven. Software development changed somehow.
That's so interesting. Why do you think that you I have my assumptions, but like, why do you think we're shipping code without caring that much?
Why I think that happens?
Mhm.
I guess it's twofold. First of all, especially with games, stuff gets more complex, and even embedded firmware and stuff, right? The Apollo system was really fairly simple. So the complexity of software changed quite massively. And I guess the development times, the pressure, the deadlines, all of that changed as well. Well, one got bigger, the other one shrank. So I think that is a big part of it. But I guess the bigger part is probably the complexity, to be honest. And that is why it is so important to actually test your source code. Which is funny because a lot of startups initially don't, because you're iterating too fast to actually make anything testable for real. So anyway, looking back at Saucelabs, how do I have to think about that as a developer? I saw on the website you talk a lot about low code. So I think you're basically having building blocks to build together your testing pipeline. How do I have to think about that?
We're the platform, and you use it whatever suits your needs. We allow you to feed in your needs within, so you can test it in scale. And so you don't have to keep pushing the buttons. So we will give you, like, for example, insights, or you can just ship it. Oh, there's a really spoiler alert. There's a soon there will be an integration with JetBrains where you can test your real devices directly on their IDE. That's a very cool one. It will be open source. I'm so proud of the team. We facilitate you on that because, especially in scale, it's very hard. It is also, it's interesting. Like the biggest case, and I think the most useful is for bigger scales. But me as a developer, when I have to do smaller projects and I really want to test all the browsers, I don't have all those devices. So I really use it for testing, make sure the quality in small devices. So that's like the low case scenario. Not low case, but like the smaller case, right? Minimal. Like me as a tiny developer, just want to make sure my website works. But it's really useful when you're a big company. Then you see huge numbers in speeding up performance and catching up things. Yeah, that's it. I found it really interesting when you said that the complexity of the software today. It's not just the software, right? Everything needs to evolve to go with. And one of the types that I find most important, that for that we do have an integration with IQ. It is accessibility testing. Because we need to think not only the complexity, it's not just in the software itself, but finally we as humankind starting to include other humans that are not part of what we call normal, which is very nocive and very forgetting the words here. It's a very bad notion of how a human should be, a human within a variety of human kinds, how we perceive the world. And that for me is the most important. That it is so funny, but because we got there for all the complexities of cloud, it's super complex. It's such an abstract concept on top of abstractions. But somehow our softwares cannot even match with the basic of the basic color contrast, which is like the more basic. And I keep thinking a lot about that, how we as humans, we can go so far ahead in some complexities. And this is why for me, being in this position between user and engineer is always put a feet on the ground. It's like, why are we doing this for? Do we need that complexity? And most importantly, what is the complexity we need to be paying attention?
Right.
It
comes down to the saying that software engineers or software engineering is the only profession that learned how to make sure their jobs are sustainable by just introducing more complexity, by hiding more complexity, or at least saying they hide complexity. I mean, something like Kubernetes is like really nice, but it hides a lot of complexity. As long as everything works, it's an amazing piece of technology. The second something fails, you better understand how it works. And that is a reason why a lot of people say it's a platform to build platform. It should never go into the hand of the end user in the sense of like the actual people running the applications. Let that be a thing for the big companies like Google, Amazon, whatever, that actually offer container runtimes as a service and not Kubernetes as a service. We'll see.
This is what.
No, go ahead.
Do you want to say something? No, it's just like because I think that this podcast reached a lot of developers and when you grain a little seed of conscience on that. There's some things that really worries me. It is thinking about, we have this mix, right? Nowadays, software development perspective is that rush for the novelty without the worry for the well done, the big complexity hidden in a way that makes you think you can do it enough until the thing really breaks. And put that together, which is happening right now, and companies trying to lower exploitation systems we live in. That's a neoliberalism system that says you have to do most with a minimum. And what we're having, I think that explains a lot, is a lot of people that do not have enough knowledge being pushed to do a lot of really complex things that would require very specialized knowledge. And then it's been called really new professionings. And I see that raises so much anxiety about for everyone, because you're not allowed to do one thing properly. You just have to know the next product that you have to feed in and know everything. It will break. And then the question is, how sustainable is that in a medium term, not even a long term, right? I would like to have more conversations with developers about that, about how can we start pushing back and thinking about, and I mentioned that because I think there's already a movement pushback with HTMX, for example. I listened this amazing interview with a developer. I'm sorry, I forgot the name. Please add it to the links.
Just send me the link afterwards and we'll add it to the show notes.
It was this beautiful interview saying, hey, I developer like this superpowered HTML to be added, because you don't need a complexity of a server-side renders. Most of the websites do not need it. Let's start going back and really understanding what you're doing and how to build those building blocks that is sustainable. Because on the top of that, it becomes literally unsustainable in the amount of data, in the amount of consumption, energy consumption. It's not only about it is about performance. It is about doing more performative software, that we're not trying to hide the complexity, but really using the tools we need for the things we need to achieve. Makes sense. I hope it made some connection. People that are listening made connection with everything.
I think so. I think a lot of people try to think more about that. It's the same as like the work-life balance. It's a big topic. Like how can we reduce complexity in our own lives? And I think work-life balance is a big thing trying to reduce that. We're pretty much out of time. One really quick last question. Yeah, 20 minutes. I know. What do you think is like the big next thing or the current trend you see, and what you think is it good? Is it bad?
It's definitely AI, but AI, I want to believe is an ethical AI. It is a way, and I will quote Richard that just gave this from the Responsibly AI Institute, now at PyCon, and I quote him quoting someone saying, I don't want AI to write my text so I can have more time for laundry. I want AI to do my laundry so I can write more texts. And
I like that. I like that.
I would find it brilliant. And a lot of talk of people pushing back saying, yo, this system, it's not thinking. It's not human. Do not humanize the system. What are you doing? And people thinking really, what is the next in the future? Is that just image recognition? Is that what it does? Are we losing our cognition because we're just trusting this algorithm that's not actually thinking to do things for us, and then we're not doing anymore? So I think it's there to stay. It is changing a lot how we're doing. It is an amazing research assistant. I like to define like this. and a lot of things are coming with very strong. There's regs or the augmented generated. That means you have to put on top of the GPTs, and I think that's here to stay. And definitely, for sure, the thing is how we are using our new knowledge to drive that. It's something that will not help us do our laundries, but we'll do the laundry for us so we can write.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, I think that is very important. We need to make sure that we use AI responsibly, and that the training sets are actually very diversified, and make sure that all groups are well included in the training set, so you don't get this like immediate bias. And I think that will be the hardest thing, because as humans, if we like it or not, we are inherently biased. So whatever we're gonna train the system with is probably biased as well. I think that is hard to overcome. Yeah, as I said, we are out of time. Thank you very much. That was very, very, very good. I love the chat. You probably have to come back at some point.
I love it. I really love talking to you, and yeah, definitely hope we can chat more.
All right. And for the audience, next week, same time, same place, listen in again. And I hope to, well, not hear you again, but you hear us again. Thank you very much.